this video, I'm going to talk about 10 retirement downsides. Yes, downsides. When you think about retirement, it's about travel, leisure, taking back my time, spending more time with the grandchildren, let's say. So there's all kinds of things that we want to do, and it is an amazing experience. But lurking in the background are downsides. And there may not be major things, but if they're not attended to, if you're not aware of them, they can really degrade your experience of retirement. So we'll talk about these 10 retirement downsides. I'll talk about some ways of thinking about each of them and maybe some strategies you can employ to make sure that they don't come back to bite you in your retirement. So I think you'll enjoy this video. Now, when it comes to retirement planning, we've been doing this for 30 years as a team at Humphries Wealth Group. And so if you're looking for some resources in the show notes, there's a free resource bundle you can grab hold of on different aspects of retirement planning. And if you're really serious about retirement planning and you want to have crafted plans specific to your circumstances, there's a link there to set up a complimentary meeting if you want to learn more about a retirement income planning services. Okay, so I don't want to be a Debbie Downer. What are the downsides? Let's talk about them. And they begin to emerge after we've been retired for a little bit of time. So the first phase of retirement, and these are based on my experiences. So this is with hundreds of clients that have retired. And not only have we helped clients retire, but we've actually journeyed with them for a long time. So these are observations. They may not be relevant for your circumstances, but as I step back, these are some of the more common downsides. So you've retired, you've done some traveling, you had a bucket list you were working on. It's all been great. But as time goes on, there begins to emerge a bit of a day-to-day, sometimes a grind, a bit of a routine. Maybe you're not totally happy with that routine. And that's when these 10 retirement downsides begin to emerge. So the first downside is a loss of daily structure. So that initial burst of activity, because you had lots to do in the early phase of retirement, that begins to come back to bite you. So it's very important that you put structure into your day and into your weeks and into your year. Set things up that you really look forward to, that you anticipate. And one of the things that I say to clients is, number one, practice retirement. Actually, before you retire, maybe some of your time off should be done in a way that mimics what retirement might look like for you in terms of your daily activities and your weekly activities. Secondly, in the resource bundle at our webpage, go to our homepage, you'll see the resource bundle there. I would recommend you download that. One of the resource pieces there is a daily scheduler where you can think through how you're going to use your time when you retire compared to how you use it today. That's a really good exercise to go through. So you don't fall into boredom or restlessness. That's a really not great place to be once you get in retirement. Unfortunately, way too many people will find themselves in that spot. Now, the next kind of negative is reduced social interaction. Most of you have probably heard of this before. You go to retirement seminars, usually they talk about it. But it shouldn't just be a note in your notebook. Like, you need to really think through what that transition will look like. Often people have pretty busy social contacts before they retire. Some of it's driven by the natural relationships in your world while you're working full time. Some of it's through contacts at work. One thing I can promise you, those relationships more often than not are not going to follow you. So those relationships fade as you begin to have less and less contact. And as your social circle begins to shrink, it can lead to isolation and loneliness. And study after study says that's brutal on your experience of retirement, both from a health standpoint and your psychological frame. So think through what your social networks are going to look like. And there might be some minor networks that you have right now, and you begin to explore them more fully. It could be maybe you volunteer at your church or your community center, maybe coaching, something you like to do. There's volunteer work. And so you can expand your frame a little bit. I've had clients that they retired from their full-time position, but they continue to do vocational activities. Could have been teaching, like I said, coaching, other activities where they really feel like they've got both that social interaction and another piece, which we'll talk about, which is a sense of fulfillment and purpose. Now, the next area is financial insecurity. This is a natural one, and it sometimes surprises people, and it comes in phases. So the first component is when people retire, they have a really big challenge. Even when they've done their homework, we've done forecasting, we've confirmed what the guardrails are for them financially. But some people have trouble spending money. It's really weird for them to go from an accumulation approach to a decumulation approach. Or actually using that capital they worked so hard to build up over the years. That's a really big shift. Having part of their portfolio maybe tied to the market where they're investing their money, trying to grow it to produce the cash flow they need for retirement, that can be unnerving in periods of economic upheaval or market volatility. And then there's a psychological thing. We hit age 60, 65, 70. There's a lot less time ahead of us. So we start thinking about our mortality and how long we're going to be around. And we think we don't have a lot of time on our side in terms of market fluctuations. And all those things conspire to make us feel insecure. So how do you deal with insecurity? If you watched any bird videos, it's plan. Nothing beats effective planning. And that planning should be done regularly. We say to our clients, it should be at least every year. Take a look at your plan, your cash flows. How did the portfolio do relative to expectations? Do you need to fine tune and adjust? When there's major surprises around expenses that are come into your situation you have to deal with, or market changes, all kinds of things can surprise us. I often say to clients, listen, when money changes, life changes. When life changes, money changes. The two things are connected. So planning and looking at the ripple effect of your new reality through financial forecasting and financial coaching is a really good way of maintaining financial confidence and peace of mind, so you do not let financial insecurity ruin your retirement. The next area really surprises a lot of people, and that's downsizing challenges. And this isn't something that you have to deal with right away. It's not something you have to deal with less in the first 5 years of retirement. But after watching a lot of clients retire and journey through that first phase of retirement, I would say that it's really important you think through, okay, will I be downsizing? Do we have too much house for what we need as a retired couple if you're in a couple relationship? When are we going to do that? What things can we do now to declutter? And I can tell you, your family will be very happy with you if you go through that exercise. So typically, we've had a lot of clients where they have their principal residence. They get to a point where physically they really can't be in their home any longer. Often one of the couple just needs a little more supports. And even when I talk to them about being proactive and really getting ahead of the curve on this, a lot of people don't. And what it does, it puts a lot of stress on them, a lot of stress on their family to, in very short amount of time, get the house listed, find another accommodation, sell the house, move. It's just crazy what has to get done. So I think the basic idea here is think about decluttering, think about downsizing, think about the ripple effect of what you need to be doing. Don't get so emotionally committed to your current residence, which is obviously full of memories and experiences. It may have been where you raised your family, that it keeps you from doing important planning in this area. The next area, which I alluded to before, is identity loss. And this is natural. I think again, I'm being a little bit of a chauvinist when I say this, but this is true. A lot of men get a huge amount of their identity out of their work. I think women are much better at having an identity that kind of free flows over a lot of different aspects of their life. I find that men are not great at that. And so if you're in a situation where you have a lot of responsibility, a lot of people are coming to you for advice or direction, man, that's a really heady kind of thing to be involved in, right? People respect you. They look to you. You are a very important cog in the whole enterprise. And just think about what that looks like and feels like when you go into retirement and all of a sudden, nobody's asking for your opinion. You're not critical in getting certain things accomplished. And that can lead to a huge piece of your identity just being pulled right away. And so that my one comment to you right now is, how will you replace those things that form your identity today? What will you do to replace some of that when you transition into retirement? Now, for some of you, again, like I said, it might be you may continue to pursue a vocation. It may look different for sure, but you'll get some self-worth and confidence from that. It might be volunteer work, right? There's all kinds of things that can replace some of what you got during your career. The next area is a decline in mental sharpness. I'm not talking necessarily about major decline from dementia or Alzheimer's here. That's everyone's fear. It's more the fact that practical reality is, again, if you look at Nobel Prize winners, when does that usually happen? Probably in your 30s, maybe your 40s. And as we get older, those creative breakthroughs and that massive creativity and horsepower that we have cognitively, it for sure declines. There's things that we can do to slow that decline, but it's for sure there, right? So you want to make sure that you think through, how do you protect that? Whether it's problem solving, other activities to work your brain power. If you don't do that, if you don't think through that decline, it can be that more swift. Now, in saying all that, there is a natural progression that happens. And Arthur Brooks, psychologist, teaches at Harvard. He's written a lot of great books. One book was on strengths to strength. And what Arthur Brooks was saying in that book was, as we get older, there's no doubt that our our capacity cognitively, our bandwidth does deteriorate. And that doesn't mean that every aspect of our cognition deteriorates. And one of the things he said is our sort of big picture thinking, our ability to synthesize information, to be able to teach and instruct actually gets better. So his book, From Strength to Strength, I'd recommend you pick it up, take a look at it, because he's trying to confront the practical realities. As we get older, we lose some aspects of our mental sharpness, but there's other aspects of our cognitive abilities that actually get better. And you want to try to put yourself in a position where you're using those aspects more often, and not trying to keep pushing through in ways that may not be sustainable for you from a cognitive standpoint. Now, the next area is marital strain. If you have a partner, and again, just think through the practical reality of what's happening. If you've been working full time, you're connecting at the end of the day, maybe you're going out for dinner, there's a date night once in a while, like whatever it might be, but your interaction will look a lot different when you're retired than when you weren't retired. And what happens in terms of other differing expectations, loss of personal space? Could there be new financial triggers, right? Stressors that can create strain, and marital harmony begins to deteriorate. The statistics are crazy out there. The number of people in their mid-60s that are going through divorce and separation. It couldn't be the worst time in your life to go through a breakup. If you had to go through a break where financially, you want to do it early on. If you're doing it when you're in your 60s, that's a really tough time to negotiate financially the ripple effect of that kind of thing. So again, get ahead of the curve. It may mean seeing a counselor, a therapist, and talk about the new reality and what you should be aware of in your relationship, renegotiate your relationship. I heard one story from a client, I think he referred to himself, maybe the wife referred to him as the Klingon man. She had her own routines. She was happy with those routines. All of a sudden, husband parachutes into her world. He's retired. He's treating the situation like he's still the boss at work. He's following her everywhere. He's giving her direction about how he thinks she should be doing things. It created an awful lot of conflict. And that's not a unique circumstance. I think that's almost like one of those constant sort of reframes that couples have to negotiate. Again, just think through that. If you have a partner, marital strain, it is likely that some level can be some reality to that, and you're going to renegotiate your relationships, your personal space, so you don't trigger too much strain in the relationship. Now, the downside that I want to talk about now is lack of purpose, and I've already alluded to this. I think you can fight against lack of purpose by thinking about what is your why? What will get you up in the morning? What are the things that you want to look forward to in terms of, do you have clear goals? What things do you want to accomplish? It's now different, but you need to have a process that helps you to engage in purposeful activities. And whether it's giving back, volunteer work, hobbies, like I said, some of you may continue to pursue vocational activities, but just think through that, because a lot of retirees, unfortunately, struggle with the whole lack of purpose issue, and is easily solved just by getting engaged and setting some clear goals before you retire. Caregiving responsibilities will be the next downside. And what I've seen with a lot of clients is at the very time they're transitioning retirement, they're taking on a lot of responsibility for mom and dad or one of their parents. And it's just one of those things where if you look at the life cycle, it just kind of lines up that way. You have mom and dad getting older. They're now probably in their mid 80s or on. You're now retiring. And at the very time that you're thinking about traveling and that kind of thing, they need more supports. So the one thing that I would encourage you to do in terms of this particular challenge is just recognize that it's a reality. Take a look at your family situation. Continue to pursue your own aspirational goals for retirement. Just recognize that you may be called upon to put some of your priorities on the back burner so you can help your parents or loved ones who are going through a tough time and need those extra supports. It's wonderful if you have some financial bandwidth to provide for some additional care, so it's not all on your side of the ledger, that you can spread it out a little bit with professional care, or hopefully you've got family that can pitch in and reduce some of that caregiving time. So it's just something to be aware of. A lot of people aren't thinking about this, and then all of a sudden they're in retirement, and then a lot of things you wanted to do get torpedoed a little bit in the short term, all for the right reasons. You want to help your mom and dad and parents. Sometimes as grandchildren will come into the situation where you hadn't thought that you'd be caregivers for grandchildren at the time you retire. But again, that's a very common thing. So think through how you're going to negotiate that. Think through what kind of commitments you're going to have in your life, and try to balance off those competing priorities so you can still pursue some of your aspirational goals in retirement. And then the last point I'll talk about is estate planning stress. Retirement does force us to confront estate planning head on. For some people, it's for the first time. You have a lot of clients that have a will, they have a power of attorney, healthcare directive, but now they're beginning to think more specifically as they're getting older about how money is going to go to the next generation. We find a big one is as charitable giving. When we have clients that have confirmed that they have sufficient capital to do what they want to do, maybe they've helped their kids already, and we confirm that there's some redundant capital, it's very common for them to turn their attention to gifting to charities and community activities to make their communities better. I think that one of the important things in this area is to make sure before you touch any estate planning, you're consistent along the way. We've had situations where we've had to do a timeout where you have a client that's done some great estate planning. They walk into their financial institution, let's say they have some accounts at the bank. The bank says, hey, you've got your estate as the beneficiaries of your RIF accounts or your TFSA accounts. And although often a direct beneficiary designation makes sense for a lot of people, it doesn't make sense in every situation. And sometimes in estate planning, it makes sense to have the estate receive assets for gifting purposes, funding trusts, that kind of thing. And so just with a signature, clients can torpedo all that important planning they had done previously. The other thing about estate planning stress is that as you're getting older, you should begin confronting important family discussions. What happens when there's cognitive or physical decline? Have open and transparent conversations. Try to encourage your kids who are reluctant to deal with these issues to deal with them. Let's have a family meeting and talk about what we'd like to see from the family in terms of their involvement. Let's talk about important issues. And let's get ready to know that we're going to talk about important issues down the road as there are physical or cognitive declines, which may happen. So you want to get ahead of that one. So those are all really important sort of somewhat negative points around retirement planning that can create stress. But I hoped it would be just a good overview to get you thinking about some of the things that might come along your way and be proactive about the planning. Hey, if you liked this video, I think you really like the one that's coming on screen right now.